My name is Ben Guzman. I am the director for the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs. We are one of the co-sponsors for tonight's event. I wanted to introduce Jennifer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Porter, and I have the honor of serving our Mayor, Muriel Bowser, as the Executive Director of her Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives. Happy Women's History Month, everybody.
So we are proud to be two members of the Mayor's Cabinet, and we have more here tonight. We are we the only twins on the Mayor's Cabinet? We are also twins on the Mayor's Cabinet. But anyway, but we're here today because a year ago, the API community in DC was, we were experiencing the pandemic in ways that many other communities were, but also we were having our own unique experiences. We are mindful of the rise of incidents of hate against our elders and against other members of our community, but we were muddling through, and we were talking about it. Literally on this day last year, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Secretary McDonough, was honoring one of our local restaurateurs for Women's History Month as a Filipino American, as a business owner, and as a former Marine. I don't know if folks know Patrice Cleary, but they were up at Purple Patch honoring her. And as he was meeting with her, he acknowledged the problem of hate, and he recognized the very active role that Mayor Bowser was playing and continues to play to address the issue. Little did we know that at the time about the unconscionable tragedy that was unfurling in Atlanta as a cold-blooded murder took the lives of 8 people, including 6 Asian American women. I've said elsewhere that the API community in Atlanta, our sisters and our siblings there, have literally been teaching the entire nation a master class on Asian American and gender studies, on how to understand the dynamics of race, of gender, of class, and of power as they played out in real time in Atlanta and at the real expense of loved ones in our communities there and really around the country. Honestly, if you think about Atlanta and the role that the API community played during the 2020 elections, they've been teaching us about political science as well, but maybe that's for another evening. But tonight, we're not here to revisit trauma. Indeed, the community in Atlanta and elsewhere are taking very different positions and engaging in very different activities to appropriately observe the 1-year anniversary that we are here for tonight. Tonight, we just had another event, but tonight we're holding each other and holding their community in our hearts, and we hope that our love and our authentic grief are enough. We hope that by focusing not on memory and tragedy, but rather on solutions and the future, that is enough. Tonight we bring together no less, as I said before, than 3 women of color that serve on Mayor Bowser's cabinet, herself, a strong Black woman, who are on the leading edge of policy and practice around public safety here in the District of Columbia. Tonight we remember the events of a year ago, but we commit ourselves to providing our communities with the tools to keep ourselves and our families safe. And tonight we stand in community and in person for the first time in a long time to continue to fight the virus that is COVID-19 and to also fight the virus that is racism, and that we will win both fights. Because tonight, again, is Women's History Month, as a man, I don't want to take up too much space here, but I'll close and hand it over to my my co-director here at the Women's Office of Policy Initiatives, but I'll close by providing a roadmap of tonight's events. After Director Porter provides her opening comments, we have a short video of one of our other partners, Kritika Ghosh and the Domestic Violence Resource Project. She is in India and couldn't be with us in person, but we have her message here tonight as well. And after that, Director Porter and our panel here will have what's sure to be an amazing discussion. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. And then after that, we'll close. The last thing I'll say is that I wanted to thank our staff and our volunteers for making tonight's work possible and for making this event possible. I wanted to take a moment to recognize Sharon Wise, who's here with the Department of Aging and Community Living. A year ago, shortly a year ago, she and Donata approached our office when we were literally on the edge. You know, we were hearing what was coming down from Atlanta, and we didn't know what to do. And they asked the very simple yet powerfully elegant question, how can we help? I think actually someone else put that on a post-it up here tonight as well. And hopefully we will continue to help each other. So I wanted to thank you for being here with us tonight. The event that we putting on together, there's actually a slate of national events that are happening around the country. In Atlanta, events started as early as Saturday, and today there are events in places, not just Atlanta, but San Francisco, and Denver, and Houston. And folks here in DC have been part of that national dialogue, and I wanted to recognize Paying Li Feng, who is taking a picture, for putting on the event that we just finished. The Art and Healing event. President Biden actually made mention of the Break the Silence events that are happening around the country in his remarks that he issued today on the anniversary of Atlanta. But tonight, then, we truly raise our voices as part of a national outcry to condemn violence and to call for safety for all of our communities. We're looking forward to what that outcry looks like on our panel, and I wanted to just close again by thank you all for coming and for taking part in our discussion this evening. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Director. Can we get another round of applause for our outstanding Director of the Mayor's Office engaging with Pacific Island Affairs? I'm so proud to call you colleague and personal friend, and I'm really proud to share this work that we share. Again, happy Women's History Month. We are here. And Ben really just shared not only for all of the folks who are involved in this event where our heart is, where our heart has been, but really the heart of our mayor. And in recent conversations with her and with our Director of Victim Services, one of the questions that came to mind is, how are women feeling? Because when we talk about how we approach everything as far as our daily work, we wanted to just check in. So before we get started, I would love for us to just check in with our hearts, just personally, before we join a community and think about your day, think about your year, and just check in with yourself and where your heart is today. And my one request is that as we join a community together, that we think of the kindest, wonderful thing that we can do for ourselves in this moment. It may be to cry, it may be to just jump up, it may be to laugh, but my ask is that we do that for ourselves in this space and create this community in love. So again, we are excited to be here for today because we have been in the house and we are together, and I just want to give a round of applause for us being here and safe because our city leaders have been working really hard, and you all have been working really hard and sacrificing for us to be here and to have moments like this, so we're really, really grateful. My team, the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives, and I'm going to take a point of personal privilege to shout out Team Mopai, who's in the room. We've been curating a month-long of Women's History Month programs, from financial trainings to celebrating women careers. And when we approached our sister agency, Moapia, around this event, we knew that this was going to be one of the signature events, and that it was so important that we were able to curate a conversation that really amplified the theme of Women's History Month this year. And the theme is providing hope, promoting healing. And I love that theme because after the few years that we've been through and the experiences that our communities have had. We know that physical healing has been a part of this public health emergency, but hope is such an important part in our healing journey. And I'm really excited that we have this conversation to talk about healing. One of the conversations I had with Director Garcia around women and safety is that wherever you are, in all of your glory, and I'm talking to women now, the wonderful women of Washington, in all of your glory, in all of your mistakes, in all of your fears, in all of your joy, and everything that you bring to the table, you deserve and we demand that you live in a city and in a society where you feel safe and you are able to live in your community and thrive mentally, physically, and emotionally, and socially, and feel safe. You deserve it. And we demand it. And not only do we demand it, but we demand and we are working to make sure every single community organization, every government agency, every neighbor, everyone here is committed to making sure that we can demand what you deserve. And so I am excited for each of you all who are here because you are a part of that solution. Being here and having this conversation is a part of our healing and a part of how we continue to be safe. I was excited to join the mayor this morning. She released her annual budget, and for those of you all who are savvy DC policy folks, you know that this is a really important day. The budget, just like anybody's home budget, it speaks to your priorities, right? And so we were really excited to learn that the mayor is investing an additional $6 million in violence prevention. And that is absolutely a top priority. And we were excited to learn about some of the investments and initiatives that the mayor lined out for us, including $1.7 million in gun violence prevention. So we know, yes, absolutely. So we know as this is top of mind and top of heart for a lot of residents, that concept of us demanding what we deserve, it has to be matched with investments and with support. So I'm excited today that we have a power dynamic panel of women who are not only leading, but they are advising, they are supporting, and they are really at the forefront of really making these investments happen, advising senior leaders, mayors, and just really helping to make a difference. We know when women lead, the community succeeds. Yes. So absolutely. So I'm excited for us to have this conversation. So before we get started, this is why I love Moapio events, because it's all interactive. We're not just talking to each other, we got multi-media. Thank you. So we're gonna watch a really quick video of another woman, produced by another woman leader, and let's take it away.
Thank you to the Mayor's Office of Asian Pacific Islander Affairs for organizing today's event and inviting DBRP to be a part of remembering and reflecting a year after the Atlanta shootings. My name is Kritika Ghosh, and I'm the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific Islander Domestic Violence Resource Project, and I'm here today on behalf of DBRP, an agency that's been around for 27 years that works to end gender-based violence by dismantling the root causes of violence stemming from racism, sexism, xenophobia, and white supremacy. As an API organization that uses a feminist, anti-racist lens, we've been working to raise awareness on anti-racist violence and bias for almost 3 decades. I'm joining you today from India to share this space with you to acknowledge that today is a day filled with grief and anger. We're grieving the lives lost a year ago in the shootings that took place in Atlanta, as well as the continued attacks against API women due to gendered and racist violence as a result of interpersonal violence, systemic and state violence. I want to also acknowledge that this is an especially sad and difficult day for the Korean community, and we stand with the community in solidarity and allyship. DBRP has seen an increase in intimate partner violence reported since the onset of the pandemic. We're also acutely aware of the violence that our API community members experience in our everyday lives, from the racial slurs thrown out to us in public spaces, to the lack of safety in our workspaces, to the harmful ways in which we are portrayed in the media. And more recently, we have seen how these forms of violence have actually become deadly, especially towards API women. Anti-Asian violence has existed in the U.S. since its inception and is the result of white supremacy, colonialism, imperialism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, capitalism, and the many intersecting systems of oppression that continue to exploit and harm our communities. It's manifest in the policies that dehumanize and otherize our communities, bills preventing Asians from obtaining citizenship, the internment of Japanese Americans in World War II, post 9/11 hate crimes against South Asians and Muslim community members, and most recently the Muslim ban. We must recognize that this violence is built into our very structures. What happened in Atlanta also speaks to the particularly gendered nature of violence. The site of violence was the victim's workplace, massage parlors, which are often sites of sex work and are criminalized. We also recognize the specific ways in which sex workers, survivors, working class API folks, women and femme, queer folks, undocumented people, and elders experience harm and erasure. In Atlanta, we witnessed how API women's bodies and labor are considered disposable. And we need to ensure at this point that we center the needs of the most marginalized folks in our communities, including sex workers and those working in service industries, and whose existence is often invisibilized. From March 19, 2020 to December 31st, 2021, a total of 10,905 hate incidents against Asian American and Pacific Islander persons were reported to stop the API hate. And this has only increased. The rates of violence have increased from 2020 to 2021. So it's clear that these acts of violence are rising. And while they are coming to the forefront in the pandemic, they have always existed. TBRP strongly believes that our work in ending gender-based violence has to be done in solidarity with other BIPOC communities, and particularly Black and Indigenous communities who have been leading this work for generations. As our community continues to heal, we have a few recommendations. One is that folks learn about and support agencies such as Red Canary Song and Butterfly Project, who are providing support to sex workers. Two, find out and support your local API serving DB agencies such as DBRP who are experiencing increased needs during the pandemic. Join our upcoming healing spaces workshops and spaces that we have developed specifically for our community members. Look at community-based non-carceral responses to violence, as we know that Black and brown bodies are already experiencing high levels of police brutality and systemic violence. And finally, give yourselves time to heal, to grieve, and to heal, and remember that healing is not linear. Once again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share this space with you, even though it was virtually, and on a day that is mired with grief. I hope that we can work together to create a better world for all of us and center the voices and experiences of survivors and those most marginalized in our communities. Thank you so much.
An absolute round of applause for Kritika and just being able to set the foundation and really frame today's discussion. We all know that our community, our respective communities, tend to be in the media and otherwise defined by data points, but we are so much more than those data points. We're the lives behind those numbers. And oftentimes the numbers they don't qualify our experience. And so I'm grateful for her for really being able to frame tonight's discussion. It's so important. It's also important that women who are in leadership are able to speak to not just the data and what we're seeing, but are able to vision map where we're going. And so I'm excited to have the honor to introduce our esteemed panel. tonight. I'll go in reverse. Motoko Aizawa, who is a commissioner for the DC Commission on Human Rights, and just a phenomenal leader, a woman who is working at the intersection of human rights and infrastructure, and just an amazing leader. We also have Rita Lee, who tonight is representing the Wildlife House Adult Daycare Center. First of all, DC, we have so much love for Wildlife House, and can we give a round of applause for Wildlife House? And so grateful to all of the leaders who are helping to support our seniors and helping them thrive. Also, we have Min Kine, who is the Executive Director of the DC Office of Human Rights, and another one of my personal sheroes and leaders. And I have watched your leadership, and I've watched you mold your team, and I'm so proud to call you colleague. And next we have Michelle Garcia, who is the Executive Director of the DC Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. Michelle has a role that many of us have benefited from, have been saved by, have been embraced by, and she is one of the most gracious and I'll say underrated, because she is so powerful. And I am so grateful to call her a friend and colleague, and to have her expertise. When you get a chance, Google Michelle Garcia, because not only is she amazing and brilliant, she is extremely credentialed and experienced. And I'm going to take a point of personal privilege here. I shared with you all, I'm a new mom, and in the past couple of years, it's been a challenge for moms. And I don't think I ever got a chance to tell Michelle, but she called me on one of those days where I needed a call. And when I think about it, I get emotional, because that's one of the powers of women, right? We call, we show up, we show up for each other, and I'm really grateful for you. So as we start the conversation, and really quickly to all of our attendees, again, thank you for being here. Those who are joining us from Facebook Live and joining us on Twitter in the conversation, we will be having the opportunity for questions. If you want to jot down questions, things that you're thinking about, things that are burning, we want you to be a part of this conversation. So please do feel free to join us. So let's just start here with a clear definition of what a hate crime is and why it's so important, if we can add, to make sure that we distinguish and have a common working definition.
Sure, so I'll start and take a stab at it. Can everyone hear me? Yep. Great, I have a pretty loud voice, so the microphone helps. So again, good evening. I'm so grateful to be here to share the space and time with everybody today. And thank you, Director Porter. Please give her a big round of applause. She's a phenomenal speaker. She's my personal hero. So thank you, Director Porter, for that question. So yes, back to hate crimes. So the definition is fairly simple, but the concept is a little complicated.
Can you?
So hate crime is any kind of crime that is motivated by a protected trait, like race or gender or sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression. So any kind of crime, like robbery, if that's motivated by a protected trait, then it would be a hate crime. And so it's important to understand that, because not everything is hate crime. It is difficult to prove hate crime in court. But what's important to understand is that in addition to hate crime, there is hate conduct, right? That you can experience in various places. You can experience hate conduct in schools. You can experience hate conduct in place of employment. You can experience hate conduct in housing, right? You try to get rental housing, you try to purchase a home, you can experience hate conduct there. You can also experience hate conduct in public spaces, right? that you might engage in. So the distinction between hate crime and hate conduct is important because we need you as partners in the community to recognize when you experience hate crime or hate conduct and report it accordingly. So if you experience hate crime, report it to MPD. They have a special unit, Captain David Hong, who is wholeheartedly passionate about, right? Yeah, there you go. That's right, yeah. Captain Hong is amazing. He will take your report seriously. He will ask you questions. He will have MPD contact you and address this report. So please take action. If you experience hate conduct, like I said, in a place of work, or housing, or public accommodations like hotels and restaurants, you can come to the Office of Human Rights and file a complaint at our office. So I hope that answered a little bit of the questions to break the ice on what is hate crimes, what can we do, I think we can get to resources later in the conversation,
Yes,
right?
yes, and thank you for that definition. I think in our public discourse and even just in the public in general, sometimes there is maybe a dilution of the understanding of what a hate crime is. And it's so important that we all, particularly for this discussion, but also in our everyday life, that we have an understanding of that and why it's so important. So thank you for distinguishing that. Do any of our other panelists have anything to add? You did a great job. Do you want to add anything? Okay. So we'll move forward, and even in the conversation around our public dialogue, the Atlanta shooting was not only a national but internationally covered event, and there was a great emotional impact across the country, which contributed to our public discourse. Can you share how you felt when you learned about the event and how it impacted you? And I'd like to give all the panelists who would like to an opportunity to weigh in on this and just reflect.
Okay, when the Atlantic shootings happened, and I was very upset about it because as the mother, as a grandmother, I was thinking about it. It can be anybody's sister, family, a daughter, can be anybody, any children's mother. Okay, those people, those ladies are most of the new immigrants. As we all know, if you go to the school, you have a good education, you can find a good job, and you have better life. But if you new immigrant, you're just coming from the other countries, you come over here. The only way we can help you to get a job or to be supporting your family. So those ladies, unfortunately, the only job they can find is use their body or their ability. We were talking about the spot because as in the Chinese community, I also belong to the Taiwanese Chamber of Commerce. As a matter of fact, in Georgia, Atlanta, the Taiwanese Chamber of Commerce, I have a lot of friends there, and they do tell me, and this is a very sad place to work. Because those ladies, and first of all, you gotta be younger lady. First of all, you gotta be younger and be able to have that kind of job because, like I'm 70 years old. I am 70 years old. I cannot work in the massage place and be a massage girl. So those are the young ladies, so their children, so they're waiting for their mother. And also, we all know, because the language barrier, okay, something happened to most of the ladies, and this is my friend told me, and they be abused, verbal abuse, may be actually attacked by their customer during their services because, as particularly I can say, in Asian community, we are so afraid to report the thing to the police. We are afraid not only the language barrier because of our fear, okay, because of our fear from our background, our culture. Because in back to Taiwan or China or Asia, we saw the police power is unafraidable. So we're afraid about police, but not in DC, because we build a very strong relationship and rapport with the DC Police Department, so that has made a difference.
I will go next. jokey about it. They said it's a problem somewhere else, it's in New York, it's in San Francisco, it's not in DC, right? And you really had to dig for that information. I think the Atlanta event really, really drove home the idea that something like this can easily happen in Washington, DC. And so it was just beyond a shocking event. But I just want to share with you, a year later, I was looking for the press coverage commemorating the event. And of course, we're in the middle of a war, the pandemic is still going on, and so it is not being given the same kind of coverage that we would have expected. But I found in Atlantic magazine an interview of 7 people who provided very thoughtful essays. And one of the writers said, I have never been more afraid about my Asian American identity. I've never been more aware and fought harder to express my identity. And so today we hear all these expressions of grief and anger, but also defiance, and that really hit me home.
What's interesting about that reflection around the time of what was going on, the public health emergency, racial uprising, and why it's so important for us to have conversations specifically around women, because we don't get to choose which of our intersectional identities that we show up with, or that we have to stand in, right? We are women, we may be immigrants, our culture, and so it's so important that we talk about not only the importance of, while everything is going on, why this is such a critical issue. I shared earlier that the theme for Women's History Month is healing and hope, and that's the theme for 2022. Why is hope and healing as a community around crimes like this so important? And anyone who'd like to reflect on that can.
Thank you for the question, Jennifer. The idea of healing, I think I first want to start by just acknowledging that we all heal in different ways, and we also all heal in different time frames. And so one thing I want everyone to be able to recognize is that there should be no expectation on when you heal from events, regardless of how someone around you may be feeling or others around you may be feeling. It is your path, it is your journey. And however you choose to heal, the supports that you get, how you engage with family, friends, and community, that is your path and your journey, and it is going to be different for all of us. But it is important to acknowledge that healing is possible, and sometimes we need help in that. Many of us growing up were never taught how to deal with grief, or deal with anger, or deal with pain, and sometimes reaching out to folks who can help us on those journeys, to professionals who can guide us and teach us those skills is important. To connect with family, friends, community for those supports is also really critical. When we look at incidents like what happened in Atlanta, it not only affects us as individuals, it affects us as families, it affects us as communities. And so finding those spaces like this space today to acknowledge those impacts and to recognize that even a year later, while we may have healed in some ways, while we may be embracing our resiliency as individuals and as communities, healing is a process, it's not a destination. And so I think it is important to recognize hope is a critical piece of that there is hope. That while healing is a journey, it's a journey we can walk on and one that we can continue to move forward in a positive way.
So, I wanted to chime in on both this question and the prior question. So, the anniversary of the Atlanta shootings is very memorable for me because right around that time, I'm going to get emotional again, so pardon me, we had a staff meeting, and I literally just broke down. And I was crying in staff meeting. And 2 things occurred to me. One, I've been doing civil rights work for about 20 years. I grew up in DC, the 80s and 90s, what we call Hill East now. I come from a background from Burma, where there's a lot of civil rights and human rights issues. And so I realized I've been carrying a lot of this burden of advocating for somebody else, you know? And as women, we tend to be more of a caregiver. You know, I'm constantly worried about keeping up my household, right? My finances, keeping it all together, paying the bills, representing us. I was a lawyer, a litigator prior to this role, and so representing people. And I realized that I really needed to share my vulnerabilities in order to heal, in order to have hope. And actually breaking down that day at the staff meeting allowed me to engage in these conversations with my colleagues, with my staff. And really it helped us form allies and really strengthen each other about the, you know, challenges that we have. And so I just want to say that, you know, I'm happy to be here in this space to build friendship with you all, build allies with you all in the community so that we can be stronger women and people.
Thank you for that response. And I think Ms. Ghosh in the video mentioned that healing is not linear, and it's so important to acknowledge the unique individuality of our healing and to acknowledge that process within ourselves. I think for myself, I was found myself very angry that day, and it wasn't until I processed my own emotions and understood where I was. And so for many of us, we may still just be processing our own experience. And it may take time, and it doesn't have to be something that's linear. So let's talk about one of the things that made the Atlanta shooting experience so tragic was not only that it was targeted, it was racially targeted, but again, the kind of public discourse that followed. And I'd love for us to talk about some of the stigma and misconceptions about the Asian community that need to be addressed and that had to be addressed during the time. I remember a powerful testimony of a sitting congresswoman, and I won't go into that, but I remember how powerful and how important that conversation was. So, panelists, can we share some of the stigma and misconceptions around perceptions of the Asian community and why they need to be addressed?
Years ago, a 65 years old woman, was attacked in New York in front of a luxury apartment building. And while she attacked, three men in the apartment building, they look at it and they shut the door and they take the video. And that social media, you all see it. That was really shock to me. And also, as the director of the Walnut Adult Daycare, my senior was so afraid that period of time. No one dared to going outside the building. They feel if they on the street was attacked by somebody, and no one will give them a helping hand. So that's how we keep on educating them. Me and my staff and my social worker, and we even have SLB people with Captain Hung and his team, the two Officer Michael King and Officer Jordan Mala and Officer Newman. They all come here, giving feel the seminar and speech to comfort them, to tell them how the police will protect them, how they're going to protect themselves. This is very important to the senior and leader around here. I really think we all have to look out for one another. Because in DC, honestly, I was living in Maryland, and I work in the DC, and I'm telling you, I would feel definitely different feeling about the police. In Maryland, I hardly see a police. I only see police when he stopped me because I got a traffic ticket. And I never see police, or because of my fire alarm's on and my neighbor's on, you see the police. But in DC, around the White House, in this area, I saw the police officers patrol around. They parked in the car there, and they make my senior very, very, I feel safe, and they are very appreciated. So I wanted to say, I want to say I thank the mayor's office and doing a good job because make my senior, make myself. And I am the DC taxpayer, but I'm not a resident. But as a newcomer of DC, I'm very pleased to come to this city.
We have to share these wonderful remarks to Captain Hunt's team and the entire Asian Liaison Unit because it's so important. Not only do they play a dual role of keeping us safe and protecting and serving us, but they also play a role in educating the community and making sure that those stigma and some of the misconceptions that the greater community may have erroneously, that we're able to demystify that and we're able to debunk that. So any other panelists want to talk about some of the stigma in the Asian community?
Well, I'm not sure it's a stigma, but I think we are very, on the whole, we are reserved, right? And we are less likely to press our demands through legal means. So it's just culturally beaten into us that we work it out in a different way, and we are perhaps litigation shy. I can certainly say that about the Japanese community here. I'm Japanese. So I think this is why, and now I'm talking about the work of the Human Rights Commission, we don't necessarily see an uptick in complaints filed by API complainants. We thought that this might be the case, especially at the outset of the pandemic. We thought hospital workers, care homes, hospitality industry, Asians are going to be discriminated because of the way they look, because of the political environment that was created by the prior president, et cetera, and we were bracing ourselves that we're going to see this uptick that's going to be very prominent from the API community. It just has not been that case. So I can tell you, I actually, before this event, went back and looked at the cases that we closed in fiscal 2021. There was none from an API complainant. I also looked at the cases we closed in 2022. To date, none at all. We do have 20 cases pending at the commission. So this is, we'll talk about the process maybe if we have a chance later on, but this is when things get really serious. And the complaints are heard by a judge. Our chief administrative judge here is sitting here, Erica Gibson. And so it goes through that hearing process, and the commission's role is to help render a judgment. We have 20 cases pending. 2 of them are complaints filed by an API person. So I think, okay, this is more of an anecdote than hard statistics, but we're, I think, litigation shy. But in this environment, in this current time, we should know all the available resources and use the full gamut of resources in order to make sure that we are protected.
I think in Krita's video, one of the things that I jotted down that she mentioned, that as some see acts of violence rising, racism has always existed. And I think to your point, while culturally we may not report or we may not see it reflected in data, to my earlier point, but in times of crises, particularly like during the pandemic, we see the exacerbation of racism and xenophobia and sexism and things that have existed but may not have been captured for cultural reasons, or just may not have been expressed in the ways that we saw them. So I want to talk about next, there is an increase of visibility for crime, particularly crimes against women, and that may not necessarily, to your point, reflect a numerical uptake. But as the visibility increases and our public discourse increases, why is it important for us to have specific resources to support safety for women? And I think I'm going to pitch to Michelle on this one.
we started this conversation and there was a premise of crime is rising. And I originally pushed back on that premise because for over a decade, we had actually seen crime decreasing nationally. We were trending down in crime. And then the pandemic hit. And we've actually seen those numbers start to shift. So when we were at the end of calendar year 2020, overall in the district, violent crime was down by 4%. And that was largely driven by a decrease in robberies. Property crime was down 20% in 2020 compared to 2019. And so we had continued to see those downward trends of crime, but with the pandemic, we started to see some of those numbers start to shift upward. And I think it's important to understand what the data shows us and also know the limitations of that data. So when we look at 2020 to 21, we did see an increase in crime in the district by about 3%, and that was equally split between violent crime and property crime. If we look at a point in time, so where we are today in 2022 compared to 2021, we are continuing to experience an increase in crime. Overall, crime is up by about 9%, with the majority of that being driven by violent crime, specifically robberies. If you follow the media, you know there's been an uptick in homicide in the district, but that is also true of so many communities, particularly large cities across the country, so we are not unique in experiencing that. And also an increase in carjackings, which again, not unique to DC, we're seeing that across the country. And so yes, we do recognize that crime is up, but it's also, we know, not equally distributed across the city, and MPD does a really good job about putting data on their website about the crime that's occurring and where it's occurring, so folks can get a sense of what is happening in their communities. But we also have to acknowledge that a lot of crime doesn't necessarily get reported to MPD. And to Rita's point earlier, particularly amongst API folks, there may be a hesitancy to report to police and law enforcement because of previous experiences in countries of origin, the role of law enforcement in those countries and those communities, individuals who may be concerned if they're undocumented in the country and what that means to engage with law enforcement. So these are all realities. And when we look specifically at hate crimes, we also know this is an underreported crime, but we did see an increase in 2021 in hate crime reports, where 50% of that increase was driven by an increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. And so we know that that may just be the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much that we aren't seeing. So it is important to have that data, but also to understand the realities of crime, and I think also the resources that are available. And you know, to Jennifer's point specifically in the question about what are the resources and the needs for women, your earlier question of what was the impact or what did you first think when you heard about the Atlanta shootings, and my first thought was not again. Not again are women being killed, and specifically are women being killed by men in this country. And so when we talk about violence, I think it's also important to recognize that for most women, the greatest threat is in their own home rather than in public in the community. And so ensuring that we have the resources that are available for any victim of crime, both women and men, for whatever that experience looks like, whether it's in private or in public. And so one of the resources we have here in the district is the DC Victim Hotline, which is a 24/7 resource that is our single point of entry for all victim services in the district. Whether that is crisis intervention, counseling, mental health services, emergency or transitional housing, medical forensic care, financial assistance, the range of services that are available. And I did bring some flyers and some palm cards that has the hotline information. I believe they're on the front table, so if you didn't grab one on your way in, please grab one on your way out. And they're a resource for anyone who's been a victim, but also people who care about and know about victims. If you have a friend, a family member, and you're trying to find resources for them, you can call, text, chat 24/7 and get access to those services and to those resources. And again, I want to thank Kritika for her presentation. They are one of the organizations that my agency funds in the district to do this specific work, and there's a whole host of not only services, but culturally specific services. And so we do encourage folks to reach out to talk to folks who are trained and who can explore what your needs may be and what options are available to you and help you
Thanks, Michelle. Do you mind sharing with, yes, sharing that hotline for our?
Sure. The number is 1-844-4 So again, 1-844-4-HELP-DC. And that is 24/7 text or chat, or text or phone, or you can chat at dcvictim.org.
Thanks so much. And for all of, our audience and for those who are watching us online and joining us online, I just want to do a really quick reminder. If there are some really great quotes, Michelle really broke down the data and shared the impact. If you are tuning in or sharing, be sure to tag at DC Malapia, and that's at DC MOAPIA, and share. Everyone knows at our events that there's always a call to action for me. If you don't share anything else, if you tweet this number, 1-844-4-HELP-DC, because we want to share the resources and we want to make sure that we're getting this out to folks who need it. So thanks, Michelle. Does anyone else want to just chime in about the importance of the impact specifically for women? I think, Michelle, you covered it pretty comprehensively. So I'll go on to the next question. Women are resilient. We just are. And a part of that resilience and the impact is that we have to fight not only sexism, but racism and ageism in a lot of our experiences within and without our community. Can we talk a little bit about ways to keep women encouraged as they're fighting so many of these intersectional challenges? And I think, Rita, you talked about being a grandmother and the generations in your family. Can we talk a little bit about how you encourage your children and the women in your family, how to stay encouraged while encouraging resilience?
I have a daughter and son and 2 grandkids, and we have a family dinner every Tuesday. This is our family tradition. And I always told my daughter and my daughter-in-law, now my 10 years old granddaughter, I always tell them, particularly the younger one, and you are so precious, and you are the queen, you are the little princess of our family, and you are mommy and daddy grandma's baby, and you really should be very taking care of yourself. Because anything, if you're hurt, and we're going to be more hurt, so everywhere you go, everywhere you do, everything you say, you got to be very watch out and what you do and who's around and also how to protect yourself. The sad things when you mentioned about, let's say, as a woman, I always keep this way. I was a single mother and I raised 2 kids, and my kids are doing very well. And women are strong because I think the women is the strongest gender. I believe that. Of course, the women also is the most of the one have to be accept all the painful, the raising the kids and financial things and taking care. Also taking care of my mother. So I think we must be very strong, and I feel I'm very strong enough because even I'm retired from the bank, I'm still working as a volunteer and while I'm down daycare. And I love to do what I'm doing, and I know women can do it. So as an Asian woman in particular, what happened to the Atlanta, I still feel very sad for those younger children who lost their mother. Because I do have a friend told me, I have 2 young ladies, they still have younger kids. And their father is not around, and they have to go to their family, a relative to adopt them. And the kids don't want to go, they keep asking for some mom. One is like only 2 or 3 years old. Can you imagine our kids, our daughter, or our grandkids that happen to them? So as women, we gotta be really united as someone together and help each other. And we don't look down anybody. A lot of time I walk on the street, we saw the people on the street, we saw the people not dressed nice, we saw some lady like we do have some the homeless lady, women's on the street. And we never gonna tell my kids, say, work, study hard, if you do this, when you grow up, you do like that. And the past Sunday, we went to the Union Station. You see a lot of tent in front of the Union Station with a little circle there with a statue. And I saw some parents and tell the kids, say, you better study hard. If you don't study hard, you will be ending like that. That is not really wrong. That's a really wrong. I think we should tell the kids, we should care. We should know, find out why those people in there. I remember the chief county come to my senior center say one thing. Because the seniors complaining about it. Oh, we have street people at home that's shelter across the street from us. We don't like them across the street from us. And the chief county said something really inspired me. He said, I hope everybody think about why there's homeless people on the street. Why this poor lady or women on the street? Why? Because they have a story you don't know. You don't know what happened to them. So if you really deep into seeing what happened to those people, you will have a heart. You will see how we're going to help them. He said, I have a gun and I have a cell phone. Well, I have a handcuff. I'm not going to use that. I use the cell phone. I try to help them. This is really inspiring. That's how I really like the DC Police Department. I don't know why. This is really inspired me. I still remember when the last year, the day one, I see the chief county. Then I can say, women, well, we have to really few force the others, not just think about ourselves. We have to really think of helping each other. I feel so sad about what happened on the tent and the street people. I feel so sad for them. And I really hope that they can find a better place for them to stay. And I know DC government will help and arrange for those people.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita. I'm encouraged by that, and I hope that the women in our Asian community are encouraged by that. I'm hoping that one day Rita may invite me to one of those Tuesday and dinners. That would really encourage me. But you're right, and I'm actually proud of our MPD team. And actually last Monday, in honor of the Women's History Month, MPD actually launched a new initiative called 30 by 30. And the goal is, under the mayor's leadership, to encourage and inspire women to join the police force, and making sure that we have, at minimum, 30% of our force being women. And so we know, again, the intersectionality and having women represented is so important in our police force that we see ourselves. So kudos to MPD and the leadership of Chief Conti. I want us to just close out with a few reflections. Asian women are leading in ways that we haven't seen, and I'm so excited about it. And we know that as women move up in leadership, we need to support them. So I'd like us to close out with a reflection on how we can support Asian women, supporting the celebration of their culture, and you all are Asian women in leadership. So how and what are the best ways that we can support women in leadership? And I'll ask you to add to your final reflection what you or your agency are doing to support and empower women. And just let our audience know ways that we can connect your work to supporting Asian women. We can actually start with you, Rita.
Like I was made.
You're just a powerhouse.
No, I just said 70 years old grandma sitting here, and I'm working starting from 7:30. Well, I'm talking about Asian women. I have to say something because I have a friend sitting there, which is Sharon Weiss, I have to say. Like I said, I just got involved with the senior center. I just got involved with the DC. So I'm not really too familiar with the culture in DC. So because I'm the suburb Maryland, the resident. So when I come here, I just have a little bit concern about say, am I safe here? Am I driving safe here? Am I come here if I'm a car stop in the traffic light? Is somebody going to come to here or bothering me or something happen? But after I come here, I say no, really have no fear. And like I said, talk about it. So we joined with Sharon Weiss and the group here, come to my senior. I feel like the women's power because she and I just clicked together. We started talking, we dancing. She bring the puppet. I just say, Asian women is not. I am the Asian woman is not really ordinary Asian women, because deep in my heart. I think I'm different because Chinese always say that. My mother said, I must have got as a boy, not a girl, but how come when I grow and the Chinese one say, if you're running through the birth stage, if you're running fast, you're a boy, running slow is a girl. My mother said I'm running in between, so I have this boy's mind and a woman's body. However, I just say as an Asian woman, we want to feel strong, we feel good about ourselves. I always tell my kids, feel good about yourself. And everybody's beautiful. You can be beautiful in slim and beautiful, big eyes. I can be beautiful and chubby and small eyes because we're all beautiful. The reason why we're beautiful, because we are the strongest gender. We do everything for our family. We suffer for our kids. We do everything for our parents. Can you imagine, mother? I taking care of my mother. She's 102 years old. She passed away years ago. She's 102. So like I said, my mother lived with me, and this is our culture. And so Asian women should be, not Asian women, all the women, you know what, we should be very proud of ourselves. It wasn't us. It's not going to have a family. Family is not going to be strong. Family is not going to be good because women is very strong. Look at the lady standing there. She's pregnant, but she's standing there and she's strong, see? And with the present smiling, this is a women's power.
I'm not sure I'm going to follow that, but she keeps on me all the time. So, I was just going to say, I think with dealing with any of the intersectional issues with racism, ageism, any of the isms, we need to build allies, like I said before. So I would say women need to help women. Women need to love women. When you see a woman leader, help them. Because when they succeed, you succeed. When sex was a last afterthought add to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So we've only been in protection for a little over, 80 years? No, 60 years. Sorry, my math is off. But I also want to thank the men in the room that are here today to say thank you. We are allies and help your women. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I've been thinking about intersectionality quite a lot because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term, it just means layering of different biases, layering of discrimination, right? And so if you're a woman, there might be biases associated with that. If you're an Asian, there might be biases associated with that. And when you're at the crossroads, you might feel those biases stronger, and there may be ramifications. The term intersectionality was coined by somebody called Kimberly Crenshaw in the 1980s. I strongly recommend you go home and Google her and look at her TED Talk on intersectionality. It is unbelievable. She's talking about African American women who were murdered by police and who did not get any recognition or accountability for the price that they paid compared to African American men. You could say the same thing about a lot of other intersectionalities, right? And she does something really powerful in the TED Talk. She asks everybody to stand up and name the names of the women who were killed. It is a really moving account of her work. But the thing is this, intersectionality tends to be understood in the context of biases, vulnerability, weaknesses. You could also understand it in terms of strengths, right? Overlapping of strengths. You could also understand it in terms of uniqueness of individuals, because they have intersectionality of a lot of different traits. And so, if we are able to think about intersectionality not only in terms of vulnerability, but also in terms of strength, I think that that is something that gives not only us strength, but those around us. And as Ming said, if we work with others with that strength, we will pass that strength on to others. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
bit about what the district is doing to support both survivors as well as women from a prevention standpoint.
So again, I think we can look at this in terms of multiple opportunities and investments and ways in which we are supporting victims and survivors, the way we're supporting women, both in terms of providing the resources and support when someone does experience a harm, but also the investments we're making in trying to prevent those harms from happening in the first place. And so, as Jennifer mentioned, Mayor Bowser unveiled her FY23 budget this morning, which made very critical investments in trying to reduce harm and violence in our communities and also increase the supports that are available. She talked about increasing the investments in the mental health and police departments so that we ensure we have a healthy law enforcement who can respond when we are seeing incidents of crime in our communities, that we want to ensure that these resources continue to be here. I know that there's investments in the Office of Human Rights and enhancing their capacity to be able to respond to that hate conduct that we spoke about earlier, things that may not rise to that level of a crime, but have significant impacts in people's lives when it impedes their ability to fairly and equitably access housing or education or employment. And so we see all these different types of investments and resources that are happening. And I encourage you over the course of the next several weeks, all the district agencies will have opportunities to go in front of council to talk about the mayor's budget. It's an opportunity for all of you as individuals and community members to share your desires on what we would like to see happening in the district. So please reach out to your council members and share your thoughts and your ideas about what you would like to see. This is really an engaged process for all of us to build a safer, stronger District of Columbia.
Thank you, Director. We have a few questions from our esteemed attendees. Everyone is esteemed. We're celebrating Women's History Month, so we're celebrating all of you all, especially for being here. We talked a little bit earlier around the data and how culturally there's can be a culture of underreporting, but we see the visibility and increasing and the need for the Asian community to actually report so that as we're making policy, we can understand the experience. How can we encourage people to report when they are experiencing issues? Great question.
So one thing I will offer for that is that for many people, until they perhaps have been a victim of a crime, they may not have had to engage with law enforcement, or perhaps when they were stopped for a moving violation, may have been the only time they had to engage with law enforcement. And the process, it can be scary, it is unknown, it can be clouded by our perceptions of what Law and Order or CSI tell us the process is going to be like. And so one of the things that I will offer is that we in the district have a network of advocates that will work with crime victims and support them and talk through what the options are and what the process is so that people and victims and survivors can make informed decisions about how they want to move forward, if they want to report, and if they need to be there with them when they are making those reports to law enforcement. So that person who is not only a support, but also advocating to ensure that their rights, because if you are a victim of crime in the district, there are certain rights you have that are codified in law, so making sure that your rights are actually enforced. So that is one thing that I would offer, is that one way that perhaps for individuals who do want to report or who are considering reporting to law enforcement, you don't have to do it alone. You can engage with an advocate who can be there with you to support you through the process. And again, the way to access an advocate is through the DC Victim Hotline.
Can I just add one thing? So, two ways I would encourage people to report is, whether you have a hesitation working with law enforcement and you don't want to be bothered with the legal process, there are two alternatives. So one is that OHR, I'm going to do a little plug here, we're relaunching something called the Listening Labs. So that's going to be next Thursday, March 24th at the Shaw Library at 6 p.m., where we're going to be listening to the community, listening to you about your concerns, what's happening to you, and how we can help. So if you don't want to make a reporting and file a legal complaint, you could still come out to these events, tell us what's happening to you so that we can be responsive as a government. The other way that you can report is to come to OHR, Office of Human Rights, and provide information about anything that you experienced or that you witnessed, right? If you see this happening, hate conduct to somebody else, report it to OHR, and we can do what's called a director's inquiry, where it doesn't have to be your name on the complaint. It'll be my name, so it'll be, my name versus McDonald's, let's say. So you can file those sort of complaints at the Office of Human Rights as well.
Thank you. We're gonna wrap up really quickly. I wanted us to share another shout out for our amazing panelists, Michelle Garcia, Mankind, Motoko Aizawa, and Rita Lee. Can we give another round of applause? Amazing panelists. I want to encourage everyone to continue to share at DC Moapia, and that's at DC MOAPIA. Share out things that you learned. Let's keep this conversation going. I want to acknowledge Judge Pearson and for your leadership. Thank you so much for being here. I'd also love to acknowledge the commissioners of the Moapia, the Mayor's Office on Asian Pacific Island Affairs. Thank you, commissioners, for your leadership and for being here. Present commissioners for the DC Commission on Women. Thank you, commissioners, for your leadership and for being here. And I also want to acknowledge our officers, particularly protecting and serving us 24/7. Thank you for your leadership and your service. Thank you for being here. Our outstanding tabling partners, DC HealthLink, DC Aging and Community Living, the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. I want to thank our Public Safety and Justice Cluster. Please, before you leave, check out the tables, take some information. If you don't need the information, share it. Yes. Yes, our Department of Behavioral Health Community Response Team, we could not do without. And the Office of the People's Council. Am I saying that right? Yes, thank you so much for being here. Take a card, leave a card. If you don't need the information, please. This is all about, again, women are amplifiers, and we want to make sure that we share this information. Can we give a big, loud round of applause for the Chinese Community Church? For hosting us and for welcoming us in this beautiful, safe space. And so just want to thank the Chinese Community Church. I have to thank the power women behind Team Moapia. They commit day in, day out to provide culturally aware, specific, and engaging programming for our DC Asian community. And we're so proud that DC prioritizes cultural leadership and our government leadership. So let's shout out Team Moapia. And of course, I want to shout out Team Mopai, who is here. They have been working all the time. I also want to acknowledge in her presence Alex Chambers, who is the outreach director for Mopai and a very proud member of our DC Asian community. She couldn't be here tonight, but she was really excited to be here. She's sick, but we are holding space for her and honoring her leadership as an Asian woman in leadership in district government. So love to Alex. I also, lastly, I want to acknowledge the women that we lost a year ago and have a moment to just have a moment in silence and reflect on their families. And if we can just take one moment to just create space for them in their memory. Thank thank you. We are here because of their sacrifice, but we will continue to fight because their lives matter and the importance not only to us but to the world. So thank you for that. I want to invite everyone, before I give my final thank you, to join us as Share Team 05 Women's History Month. You see us running around and we're curating exciting programming for women. I want to invite each of you all to join us this Saturday on Freedom Plaza at 9 a.m. for the annual Herstory 5K. It's a free 5K. You can come get swag bags. They always have these really fly t-shirts. I was asking today, what color is the t-shirt this year? Because I want to coordinate, and they didn't tell me. So we all will be excited. We have some celebrity appearances. The Housewives of Potomac will be there. Some of the players from our women's professional teams, from the Washington Mystics and the Washington Spirit will be in attendance. We have over 3,000 DC residents signed up for Saturday's 5K. So join us. The weather is supposed to be 75 and amazing. So definitely join us for the next Women's History Month event. And be sure to follow at DC Moapia, and that's at DC MOAPIA, and at DC MOPI, which is the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives, for all of our upcoming future events. Last but not least, I want to thank, and I'm going to ask Director Guzman to join me on her behalf and in her absence, to thank our mayor for her leadership and for her prioritizing this conversation and creating this community space for us to be able to be here. So thank her for entrusting us. She is expecting for us to report back on this conversation. So if you haven't, go ahead and tweet and share out your thoughts and reflections. She presented her budget today, so she is looking forward to us being engaged and inspired to move forward. So we want to thank our mayor and thank each of you for joining us. Ben, you want to take us home and close it out?
No, just, it's been a very emotional day. I honestly, it's one of the things that I did not think I would be feeling. But, just thank you for